Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Healthy Living, Healthy Eating series with the UCSD Retirement Association. We welcome today UCSD Recreation's registered dietitian, Erin Kukura, who will be leading us on this journey toward better living and healthy eating. Erin Kukura, welcome, and go ahead, please.
Hi, well, I'm excited to be here today virtually with everyone and excited for this series. So I feel like we have a lot of really fun nutrition topics that we'll be getting to over the next few months. So I'm really happy to be here and definitely, we'll have time for questions at the end. So you can always leave those in the chat throughout, and then we'll definitely have time at the end to answer any and all questions. So I guess with that, we'll get started on today's topic, which is all about meal planning and food prep. So I know a lot of us have probably had different eating habits, different cooking habits, especially with COVID. But I still think kind of talking about meal planning, the importance of it, and then a lot of tips and tricks just to make it easier is really beneficial. So it's kind of what we'll talk about today. So we'll start off with just talking about how to make a nutrient-dense meal. So that way you kind of know what are the components that we should be incorporating, at most meals. How do we really maximize what we're eating to get the most nutrient density out of it? And then we'll talk about how to start meal planning. So maybe for those of you that, are already experts at this, I'll offer some tips or tricks. Or maybe, this is something you've kind of gotten out of the habit of. So we'll talk about how to start meal planning. And then also talking about just some kitchen essential equipment or just some helpful kitchen equipment as well. And then also just finish up with some easy, quick meal and snack ideas. Just gonna move this out of the way. Alrighty. So first, kind of what I mentioned is talking about, what are the food components to try to incorporate at meals, what makes a nutrient-dense meal. So that's what we'll kind of start with going over with today. So the first thing I always like to highlight is a plant food. So this can be, a fruit, a vegetable, but any one of these fiber-rich foods is really important to include kind of at each meal. Obviously, this is where we're getting, the fiber, which is really helpful for our gut microbiome, for lowering cholesterol, also helps to decrease risk of a lot of chronic health diseases and cancer. We also find that these plant foods are really rich in antioxidants, which help to kind of, again, lower that risk of cell damage, the free radicals. So incorporating a plant food kind of at each meal will really help to make sure that we're, getting a good amount of that plant food in our diet. And then starchy carbs. So carbs obviously have a lot of different opinions out there in the world and in the media in particular. But the reality is that carbohydrates, in particular these starchy carbs, are actually really essential for our overall well-being. They provide our body with that primary energy source that fuels our brain, all of our muscles, so our ability to walk, to cook, to do all of our movements in our daily life, but also just in terms of thinking and processing as well. And this is where there's different kinds of carbohydrates. So the more we can incorporate those starchy carbs, so thinking things with more of that fiber, where we're going to get even that added benefit. So things like sweet potatoes, quinoa, beans, lentils, rice, oats are all going to have these really great benefits. So don't need to avoid them. And then protein. Protein is really essential and necessary. Obviously, it's a foundation for all of our cells. It's necessary for things like antibodies, which help our immune function. And also, as we get older, our body does require a little bit more of additional protein intake. And so this is where we can get it from a variety of sources. So Obviously, a lot of us tend to think of the animal sources, things like fish, eggs, meat, but we also get plenty of protein with a lot of plant-based sources as well. So things like beans and lentils, tofu. Um, so I think most people tend to get a variety, but it's really important to add protein at meals just because, one, we need that additional protein, and also it helps with feeling satiated. So if you've ever had a meal that was just like pasta, without any meat or cheese or beans in it, you might have found that you kind of maybe felt full, but then hungry again like an hour later. So incorporating that protein really helps with feeling and noticing that satiety. And then another component that I try to encourage is incorporating the healthy fat. So fat is, really necessary for also that satiety, for absorption of all of those fat soluble vitamins, and is really adequate and necessary for proper hormone synthesis as well. And there can be a lot of anti-inflammatory properties in some of these fats. So getting things like avocado, olive oil, nuts, seeds all typically contain these healthier fats. And then obviously salmon is really well known for those omega-3s, which have even more of those kind of anti-inflammatory properties. So making sure that we have a little bit of this healthy fat at meals can be really beneficial. And then the last piece that I like to highlight is flavor. So this is where adding spices and seasonings and herbs really help to make that food taste good. None of us want to eat food that doesn't taste good. So incorporating this kind of flavor obviously makes it taste good, but then we also see a lot of really positive health benefits in a lot of different types of spices. Turmeric is really common, cinnamon, garlic, onion. We see a lot of health benefits consuming these as well. So there's kind of multiple benefits to incorporating these. So those are just kind of some easy things that I like to think about when I'm building a meal. And as you can see in this image, you have your plant food with the green beans and tomatoes. We have that rice for that more starchy carb. That salmon has the protein, but also typically that salmon's going to have that healthy omega-3, but I'm sure there's some olive oil mixed in there as well. And then we also see like a seasoning on the salmon, some of the sprouts and things like that as well, just to like amp up the flavor. So kind of a great nutrient dense meal. So some other examples, one of them is going to be kind of this Mediterranean dish, kind of what we just mentioned. You have that protein with the chickpeas, you have your plant food with the peppers, and then some of that pita bread. I imagine there's some olive oil in there for that healthy fat. So again, you can kind of see how this happens in a variety of meals. And then also this oatmeal type of breakfast. So oats obviously are that starchy carb. There's that Greek yogurt for the protein, the peaches for that plant food, and then we have some walnuts there for that kind of like healthy fat as well. So it's easy to kind of incorporate those little things and maybe take notice, is there a certain nutrient that you tend to, not incorporate at most meals? Or I think another common one is for breakfast. Oftentimes we might only eat like just oatmeal or, just a piece of fruit or something like that. So sometimes kind of seeing if you can add more of that balance to certain meals is really helpful. All right, so now that we kind of talked about, what are those components that we want to incorporate, we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about actually meal planning. So I think of meal planning as just like taking the time to think about what are you going to, prepare for the week or like need to purchase from the grocery store. And there's a lot of benefits to doing this. So one is it really helps to prevent unbalanced choices. So I don't know how many of you have ever had this experience where you don't really have any food in your fridge or your cupboards. Maybe there's like a sad little bell pepper in the little cupboard in there. So what do? Chances are you're already hungry. So this is where we tend to kind of choose more available, convenient foods, which typically aren't going to be as nutrient dense or as healthy, right? So I think this is where we find ourselves just like going and ordering out or getting the Uber Eats, Whereas if we have, meals on hand and we have food available and we kind of have a plan, it can help kind of naturally prevent getting to that point where we just have to go get whatever's quick and convenient. It also can provide structure in some ways too. So, I think this kind of applies a lot more to individuals when they are like going to work or things like that. It can be helpful, but I think it can also still provide some structure if maybe your day no longer fits into that. If you have that freedom during the day, it can still help to make sure that you are eating, and taking breaks throughout the day. And it also typically saves time and money, right? So you're not having to scramble every day and like go pick something up. Typically buying food out costs more, so it can be helpful in that way. And just also kind of that form of like taking care of ourselves, right? Feeding ourselves is one of those basic needs, along with sleep, shelter, things like that. So how to get started? This is just kind of some tips that I've found to be really helpful, but there's no right or wrong with meal planning. It's really just finding what works for you. But I think one of the really important parts to this is trying to make it part of your habit as much as possible. So like with anything, the more we can really integrate it into our kind of weekly routine, the easier it becomes over time. So I like to start with recommending just pick, any day of the week to meal plan and to grocery shop. And it can be any day. So it can be, Wednesdays, it can be Fridays. I personally like to go like Saturday morning, but since COVID started, I'll go like Tuesday during an hour break or something. So it really can be any day of the week, but the more you can keep it like a consistent time, the easier it'll be to make that habit. So kind of a thing to think about is looking at your week ahead. So, do you have, again, this is more pre-COVID, right? You may have had certain, things that you did at a certain time, or you had plans with others for certain meals. Obviously with COVID, things are a little different now, but it can be helpful to know, do you have certain days that you are going to be home later, or you typically are busier and you need something that's going to be a lot quicker to throw together. And then from that, you can kind of like fill in your week and see like, well, how many meals do I actually need? What do I have on hand? That can be really helpful in terms of preventing kind of food waste and also helping to save money. So if you already know that you have some chicken in the fridge or in the freezer, you can kind of build a meal around maybe what you already have. And then obviously from there, fill in the other blanks. What do you need from the store? And I think this is kind of a great example. So there's a website called thekitchen.com, but the kitchen is spelled without an E. But I found a lot of great resources on there. They have these kind of weekly meal plans, which I think can be really helpful to get inspiration and ideas from, and a lot of really easy recipes. But I like this because I think it's a good visual. So one of the things I love about this is that for breakfast and lunch, they kind of just have like two options. So you're getting some variety, but you're also not having to like come up with, double the amount of meals. And then for dinner, you'll see those are all different meals, but you can kind of overlap, like the chili, they use that for leftovers and things like that. So again, finding what works best for you, your household, your family, but you don't have to have a meal, for every single, like a new meal for every single eating pattern as well. The other really cool thing about this website that I liked as well is they include like a power hour. So for those of you that enjoy kind of meal prepping to some degree, granted, I would probably never do all of these things, but it can be helpful, and I'll do this sometimes too. Like if I am on a Sunday and I'm gonna cook dinner, I might also cook like my grains for the week. So if I know that I'm having rice or quinoa, I might do that. I might roast some veggies all at the same time, just so I can kind of do some of that prep work for other meals so I don't have to do it, the night of. Obviously, it's going to vary person to person, but so there's ways to do it without having to like make everything on Sunday for the whole week. I think the thing to keep in mind, and I don't know how many of you do this, but there was kind of this push for meal planning and meal prepping where people would make everything for the week on Sunday and they would eat kind of the same thing for all week. And I find that that just really backfires. You know, for the majority of us, we tend to lose interest in the same food after like 2 or 3 times. So I think wherever we can have that variety and mix it up is really important, while also still working within like the time constraints that we have. So I think that's why I really like this kind of meal prep, because I think it's kind of a good in between, to highlight how you can still kind of plan for those 2 meals in the week. So that can help cut down the amount of prep work, but you also have variety. Alrighty, so a couple other tips and tricks that I always like to share, kind of like I just mentioned, you know, having variety obviously is really essential, but at the same time, trying to not overwhelm ourselves with having to have, you know, all a different meal every single eating experience. And I find for a lot of us, you know, breakfast, we might tend to eat similar things, or having kind of 2 options is helpful. And likewise with lunch. And I don't know about you all, but since I've been working from home, it's been even easier to kind of see like, do I want leftovers? Do I want to just make a sandwich? You know, so I think if you also have that flexibility, it's not, you don't kind of have to plan so much ahead if you can really pick kind of what's in the moment, as long as you have those options available. Another great idea is like the idea of kind of a theme night. So I find this really helps when you're trying to come up with recipe ideas. It can feel like, you know, you're having to start from scratch every single week, but the more that you make these like theme nights, sometimes that also helps to just make it a little bit easier. So for example, if every Tuesday is Taco Tuesday, you can still mix it up and have chicken tacos one week and, you know, mahi mahi the other week. But it still also helps to make it so you're not having to like come up with a whole new idea every week. Another thing that I'm a really big fan of is just having like quick go-to meals on hand. I don't know if this happens to any of you, but you know, there's just some nights where either what we have, you know, doesn't really sound good, or I'm just tired, or it's hot and I don't want to turn the stove on. So sometimes I love having go-to meals on hand. So for me, this is often like having, you know, some type of like a taco. Like I feel like I always have tortillas and a can of beans and salsa, avocado, so I can throw that together. I also love like Mediterranean food. So I always have like frozen pitas, frozen naan bread with some hummus and veggies. So having those kind of go-to meals on hand can be really helpful. And then keep a master list. So again, kind of if you're having to sit down every week of like what you're gonna, you know, get from the store and what recipes you want to have, rather than feeling like you have to come up with new inspiration every week, I really recommend keeping a master list. And that way you can just, you know, refer back to that and see like, well, what have we not made in a while? What's something that sounds really great? Obviously too, as I mentioned, like with the seasons changing, obviously that can vary in terms of what we're eating as well. So that's really helpful to just kind of pull from what you already know without having to get, you know, new inspiration every single week. Then kind of like I highlighted too, you can be helpful to prepare some of your components. So like I said, I'll typically make like my grains ahead for the week, or like roast vegetables. Sometimes I might like make another meal if it's like a soup or a chili or even like a casserole type thing. I might make that just to kind of already have that ready to go during the week too. So that can help just make it so you're not having to cook, you know, every single day. And another thing I want to highlight too is it's okay if you aren't cooking. You know, it can even be like planning out your meals that you're going to get from Trader Joe's that you are just heating up in the microwave, you know, but still just having some sense of what you're going to get and does it have kind of that balance of components is really helpful. So you can make sure that you are adding a plant food, you know, to maybe something that you're just getting that's already kind of pre-made from the store or something as well. So this does not mean you have to cook everything from scratch. I think that that's really unrealistic as well. But it's just kind of trying to have that balance and make sure you're incorporating that nutrient density at each meal. All right, so that's kind of the like admin part of how to meal plan. So we're going to touch a little bit on, you know, food prep itself. So again, kitchen essentials are always necessary. Normally when I'm talking to college students about this, you know, they probably need a little more guidance with some of these things, but I'm sure for a lot of you, a lot of this is probably much more well known. But I would say, you know, some things that are really helpful and newer are like the Instant Pot and the slow cooker, which we'll kind of touch on. But yeah, having good knives, I think, is always helpful. But yeah, pretty sure this is all kind of self-explanatory. So kind of like I mentioned, there are some great appliances now that can help make our lives even easier when it comes to cooking. So obviously the slow cooker, you know, that's been around for a really long time, is a great way to throw everything in there, set it on low or high, and it's basically done in 6 to 8 hours. So this is great for making soups, chilies.
Ready?
You can also make, you know, casserole type things in there as well. You can do potatoes, rice, you know, all different kinds of starches, all different kinds of proteins. But it's really nice because it's all in one dish. So you're not having to cook, you're not having to clean a lot, and you basically just let it sit all day and then it's done. So I love these, especially, you know, when it gets a little bit colder in San Diego. It's nice to have something that's like warm and done by the time, you know, you're ready to eat. Alrighty, then there's the Instant Pot, which has gotten really popular in the last few years. The Instant Pot is slightly different from the slow cooker in that you are still kind of having to cook the food. So I believe nowadays they do have options where it's a slow cooker Instant Pot like in one machine, so you don't need to buy the 2 separate ones. So you can kind of decide what you want to use. But if you use it as an Instant Pot, it basically works by kind of pressurizing it. So essentially what that means is you'll put in your ingredients. It takes about 15 minutes for the container then to pressurize, and then it'll cook that component, you know, much more quickly than it would take to cook it on the stove. So I believe you can take like a meal in, you know, 20 minutes total. So you'll take like the 10 to 15 minutes to pressurize, and then it might take another 10 minutes to cook, you know, your chicken and potatoes, or there's a recipe for like chicken tikka masala you could do in there. So it basically works by using that pressure to cook it much more quickly. You can also brown stuff on the bottom too. So you can like brown the meat or vegetables or potatoes and then use the pressurizer as well. So this is another really cool thing. There's whole books on like Instant Pot cookbooks, but a lot of people swear by it. I personally don't have one because I just don't have the space, but my sister has one and loves it. And a lot of people just have said that it's really helpful too. So this would be something you're more making like at dinner time, but it cuts down that prep work immensely. And again, it's all just in one container. So it's a lot easier in terms of cleanup and whatnot. So Instant Pot can be really helpful. And then a couple recipe websites that I really love, as I mentioned, The Kitchen. Again, it's The Kitchen without an E. That one is really great for a variety of recipes, for those meal plan kind of options as well. So just for getting inspiration. Budget Bites is a really great one. That one's typically for more of like beginners and things like that. So if you're looking for something quick and easy, it's a great website. And then 2 kind of blog ones I really enjoy are Pinch of Yum, Love and Lemons. Those are really helpful. And also things like Blue Apron, I found that you can access all of their recipes online. So if you've ever used Blue Apron, or again, just looking for kind of inspiration, you can find all of their recipes available on their website. So another kind of easy, fun place just to get some new ideas. So Couple recipes that I really like and recommend, overnight oats. I love this for breakfast. I find for a lot of people, you know, they'll tell me that they eat oatmeal for breakfast. And I, you know, kind of ask a little bit more of like, okay, do you add anything with it? And they're like, no, I just eat the packet. And they're wondering why they're hungry, you know, an hour or so later. And again, this is because if you just eat the oats, that's just going to be that, you know, carbohydrate that's going to get absorbed pretty quickly. So this is where adding things like yogurt is really helpful to get that protein, adding nuts, and adding that fruit really helps to just like bulk it up. And then the overnight oats are a little different in that you kind of add the oats to the milk and the yogurt like the night before, and then it'll kind of soak up that liquid so it'll be soft. And then you can add in like fruits or nuts or things like that, you know, right afterwards. And you kind of get that really balanced meal. You can prep it the night before and is really enjoyable. You can also make hot oats as well, but this is something that I like, and there's different variations of toppings, so you can kind of keep adding a lot of variety. Another meal option that I like, I have not made this one in a while just because it's been so hot here, but sheet pan meals are fantastic. So essentially, you know, just cook everything on that sheet pan. So again, you're only kind of getting one pan dirty. I also always put parchment paper down because then nothing's sticking to the pan, so I'm not having to like scrub it off. And this is where you can get really creative with, you know, different kinds of proteins, different veggies. But potatoes typically work really well here, and you kind of start with like the longest thing. So typically the potatoes take the longest. Then you can take it out, add your protein on there, put that back in the oven, and then take it out, put those veggies on there last, and then let it cook for like 30-ish or so minutes, depending on what you're doing. But again, really quick, easy, and I like this again for when it's a little bit colder and it doesn't feel so horrible to have your oven on. Some other cool ideas too are one pot meals. So again, keep the dishes, you know, pretty minimal, and you can also make a larger amount. So if you know, have other household members or, you know, prefer to have a lot of leftovers, these are also really great too. So even if you're searching for recipes, Googling like one pot meals can bring up, you know, all different kinds of meals. And these also are really great. That would work really well in like the Instant Pot or even your slow cooker too. And then lastly, I'm a huge fan of like grain bowl types of things. So there's all different kinds of varieties out there. And again, this is where you can just mix up different things, but this one's really awesome, especially with kind of the focus on farro, which is just a different kind of grain, and then incorporating the shrimp, chickpeas, but really quick, easy things that you can kind of throw together and just keep kind of substituting different ingredients. You can also do like a burrito bowl, a stir fry that, you know, they're all kind of similar and pretty quick and easy to throw together. And then a couple snack ideas. I know I'm always looking for snack ideas, and the more I have things on hand that are more kind of nutrient dense, you know, the better I feel, the more energy I have versus kind of grabbing, you know, the like chocolate covered whatever. So I'm a big fan of things like peanut butter or any kind of nut butter and fruit, trail mix, you know, veggies and hummus, yogurt and berries. And then there are some kind of protein bar type things out there like the RX bars or the Lara bars that are made with a little bit better of ingredients, but you know, anywhere we can get more of those whole types of foods, again, that's where we're going to get more of those nutrients. And I like to pair a lot of my have protein at my snacks because again, you get that satiety. So I feel like it holds me over a little bit better if I have like an apple with peanut butter versus just an apple or things like that. So hopefully it gives some snack inspiration. Then another kind of popular snack idea are these energy bites. So you can make them yourself. Usually it's oats mixed with like some kind of nut butter, and then you can add in some dried fruit and spices. And again, there's a lot of different variations out there, and you can either put it in a food processor or you can just mix it by hand in a bowl. And then I find that I just kind of freeze them, or you can put them in the fridge too if you're going to eat them a little bit more quickly. But these are also really great to grab and snack on because they're really nutrient dense and also taste really awesome. So these are another kind of more intensive snack, but I find I really like these and are really great to like take on the go or things like that too. Alrighty, so I know there's a few questions coming in, so we'll definitely get to those, but I also wanted to let you all know of a couple resources. So I do a weekly Facebook Live every Tuesday at 4 on the UCSD Recreation Facebook page. So you can join, and you can also see like all of the videos I've done so far on there as well. And then we also have the Rec Playground, which I do some webinars on there, and there's a lot of other great like fitness content, yoga, Tai Chi, ton of really awesome, cool, like Zoom, different types of workouts. And then I also am available for individual counseling as well. So if you want to meet or have specific questions, you can definitely reach out to me, email me, or find it on the Rec website. Alrighty, so with that, let me see if I can, so definitely let me know if you have any questions in the chat. It looks like there's a couple. All right, so there's a question about, is the Instant Pot the same as a pressure cooker? Yes, I believe so. So I know, I think the Instant Pot is just kind of the newer way, like the newer way to say that, but yeah, it's essentially the same thing where it works by pressurizing. So yeah, it's the same. Alrighty, and then let's see, do mushrooms have nutrient value? Yes. So I would like to say, you know, when I think about food, there's a lot of information out there and it can feel very overwhelming. I know even for me sometimes. And, you know, I think the thing to really think about is whenever we're eating kind of whole types of food, so a food that's kind of in its whole food form that is closely resembles, you know, what it is in the wild, it's going to have nutrients. So mushrooms have nutrients, celery has nutrients, you know, any fruit, any vegetable, any whole grain, any protein, all of those foods are going to have nutrient value because they're in their whole food form. So they're going to have, you know, mushrooms and all fruits and vegetables are going to have, I guess mushrooms are fungi, but still they have, you know, definitely some nutrients, they have energy, they have, you know, some protein, typically fiber, and then they have all of their, you know, really awesome properties like antioxidants and polyphenols. So yes, absolutely. So all incorporating any and all of these foods are so beneficial, and that's where variety also is great because all of them are going to have different amounts of different kinds of compounds and vitamins and minerals. Alrighty, what do you recommend for washing fruits and vegetables during COVID? Great question. You know, from what I've gathered, you know, it hasn't said anything about anything being able to transmit via food. So I kind of just recommend doing the normal, you know, make sure you're washing them before you're eating them under water. If you can, kind of even scrub it a little bit. I mean, I just do that in terms of getting like whatever, you know, dust is on it, but I'll typically just do that. But I believe if you're just washing it, it's, you know, as far as I've heard, that there's not really much of a risk. And then obviously if you're cooking it or if it's something that has a peel, those are obviously going to be even safer, right? So if you're cutting up your bell pepper and then cooking it, that should be obviously even more safe. And then if you're eating like a banana, it's protected by that peel too. But you know, as far as I've seen, eating an apple is still fine. Just make sure that you're washing it, you know, before you're eating it. Alrighty, love all the questions, everyone. So, so for overnight oats, what kind of oats to use? Great question. So there are different kinds of oats, all from, the quick instant oats all the way to the steel cut oats. And essentially what it is it's just the amount of processing that's gone on in the oats. So the instant oats have been processed a little bit more to where they're going to cook much faster than your steel cut oats. So you can use any and all of them. I just use like the rolled oats because I find I prefer that texture more, but you can use any and all of them and you're still going to get kind of the same benefit because you're not cooking it. It's more just soaking up what it is. So if you want to go with the steel cut oats, those should work just fine too because they're just going to be soaking it up. Any particular bread that you would recommend is tasty and healthy? Oh my gosh, there's so many breads out there. I think it's, a preference type of a thing. A whole grain bread is always going to be best, and where you can look at the ingredients, and kind of see, typically most breads are going to include, a little bit of sugar or honey or something, but if you can kind of see that they're at the end of the ingredient list, it's going to be a little bit better. I also find that for some people with certain GI intolerances or things, a sourdough actually works better for them because everyone kind of, has different sensitivities. So I'm a big fan of like a sourdough bread, or I just get my bread at like Trader Joe's, but I think it's going to depend where you're at, but the more you can get like a whole grain bread is going to be better. Sometimes that helps. There's a lot of options though, so it can definitely make it challenging. Alrighty, yeah, love all the questions, everyone. Let me know if you have any more. I'm definitely happy to help answer them. And I believe the next webinar was the Healthy for the Holidays next month. Yes, no. So that should be a really fun one. Obviously holidays are going to be a little bit adjusted this year, but I still think it's important to talk about because the holidays can be a stressful time for food, and what are like those kinds of things we can do to, stay healthy, especially this year during the holidays. Okay, another question. Is it better to eat your fruits and veggies as opposed to making a smoothie? This is a really good question. So when you're eating things as a smoothie, you are essentially like mechanically breaking it down, right? So it's kind of the same as if you were to, after you're chewing, that's essentially kind of going to be a similar texture, right? I know it's kind of like gross, but the reason why I say this is because our body senses different food textures differently. So for example, the mastication, the chewing releases certain hormones and certain things, and we tend to actually absorb things when they're in that liquid form much more quickly. So if you eat an orange, you're going to be chewing it and breaking down more of that fiber and all of that. And so typically we feel more full, versus when we're just drinking something, we're not having that process happen, and we tend to absorb that much more quickly as well. Now, drinking a smoothie though, is great for some people because it does actually help them to get adequate fruits and vegetables into their diet. It's a great way to sneak in spinach and other vegetables, cauliflower. So I think wherever you can have a variety though is good. If you're only consuming your fruits and veggies as a smoothie, that's not ideal. But if you're drinking smoothies here and there, I think it can be totally, part of your routine. I just again, recommend making sure you're having some protein, whether that's adding some Greek yogurt to that or some nut butter, because again, if it's just the fruits and veggies, you're typically going to get hungry again much more quickly. And sometimes I've even seen smoothies where people then put half a banana on top or eat some blueberries or some nuts on top, so you are able to still get some of that chewing sensation, if that makes sense. Can you touch on portion control? Yes, this actually is in, so portion control is, is a very big topic. I'm trying to think of a way to like condense it. So all of us have our own needs in terms of how much to eat and what's going to work for our body. And it also varies day to day, right? So it's really challenging because no one knows how much you need except for you. And it's going to vary as well based on what you ate earlier, how much you ate. Again, if you're incorporating things like fiber and fats into your meals, typically that also tends to make us feel more satisfied. So it's really going to depend on a lot of different factors. And I touched on that, I believe, in my the Debunking Nutrition Myths webinar. So definitely stay tuned for that one. But I think another aspect to portion control, and one that's also in my Psychology of Eating webinar, is how are we eating? Because if we're eating because we're really hungry or we're distracted, we also tend to eat whatever on our plate. So there is some elements of like being mindful of how much is on our plate, but also understanding how eating distractedly or eating when we're really hungry can also make us tend to eat much more or not notice how satisfied we are. So I definitely hope that kind of answers that, but I'll definitely touch on that in a future, in those 2 other webinars as well. All right, so question about vegetables. Is it best to eat them raw, to broil them, roast? I would say any and all ways is going to be beneficial. You know, there's to a certain, you know, I think this question comes up because there's been stuff out there that, you know, certain vegetables lose their nutrients if you cook them. But at the same time, it's not like if you roast broccoli that it's, you know, void of any nutrients, you know what I mean? So I would say whatever is the way that you like them, that you will eat your vegetables, is the best way to do it. Again, obviously, if we're doing some kind of processing, typically, yes, we might lose some nutrients, but it does not mean that what we're eating then has nothing and there's no benefit. There's still fiber, there's still, you know, those antioxidants, those vitamins and minerals. And so it's really important to consume it in a way that you actually like it. If you're trying to force yourself to eat like boiled Brussels sprouts, and you're not a fan of it, it's not going to be the best thing. So, and there's also some vegetables that actually, like tomatoes, typically have more nutrients when they are cooked and processed. So I wouldn't get too stuck up on that. I would just say eat it and incorporate it in a way that tastes good, you know, to you. And another question, is there a way to find what foods should not be mixed? So maybe I'm misreading this, so let me know but I wouldn't say there's no foods, you know, you don't have to worry about foods that should not be mixed. And I don't know, again, if this is kind of to what I was mentioning earlier about just foods to incorporate for that nutrient-dense meal. And I just say that because for most of us, we tend to feel good if we have a protein, some plant food, and a carbohydrate and some of that healthy fat at each meal. But again, it's going to vary based on you. You know, for some of us, we like to have, we feel better with, you know, greater amounts of carbohydrates, and other people feel better with less. So it's also finding what really works best for you, your body, what ways of eating really, you know, do you find that you feel most energized, that you feel that you're not feeling, you know, sluggish or having like GI issues or things like that afterwards. So I hope that makes sense. Okay, yeah, and then there's a question about cooking at a high temperature. So this one, I'm still, you know, there's definitely some different questions around that. Essentially, there's this kind of thought that when an oil has what's called a smoke point. So there's a certain temperature at which it will start to essentially no longer stay that liquid and will start to evaporate and become a smoke. And there's thoughts that this is kind of leading to like rancidity, and that it's kind of no longer, that there can be some like more negative effects. And so olive oil does tend to have a lower smoke point than say like peanut oil or thank you. Yes, oxidation. That was the word I was looking for. It can lead to some of that oxidation. And so things like avocado oil have a much higher smoke point. So it's kind of what I've heard more recently is, you know, it's kind of recommended to use an olive oil as like a dressing or on something that's like at the end if you're like putting it over something. And then if you're roasting or sauteing things or it's at a much higher temperature, using something that has a higher smoke point like an avocado oil, I believe that one goes up to like 425, 450, so should be fine for roasting, sauteing. That one will stay where it's not going to be leading to that oxidation. So yeah, awesome. Great questions, everyone. Any comments on the various time-restricted diets? Yes, this is another one that I'll go into much more in detail in my debunking nutrition myths, but trying to think of, again, a way to like compress this. So essentially, you know, the time-restricted diets are essentially restricting your eating into different windows. And there's different variations. I think the most common one is the 16-8, where you're restricting your eating, your feeding time within an 8-hour window. So for kind of what's been more mainstream is like you eat between 12 p.m. to 8 p.m. and then you fast overnight and then you don't consume anything until 12 p.m. the next day. And there's actually, you know, the research really doesn't support that there's a lot of benefit in human. They've seen benefits in a lot of rat and animal models, but in humans, it's much more kind of inconclusive. Some of the preliminary research that has shown some benefit, they also paired this restricted time window with a restricted like eating pattern. So people were also cutting their calories. There's actually a study that just got published last month that was actually a randomly controlled trial evaluating does time-restricted eating have any difference on weight loss or other kind of metabolic markers with continuous feeding, so eating throughout the day. And they found that no, there was no difference in weight loss between the groups. And in fact, the time-restricted eating group had a greater loss of lean body mass, which is not what we want. So I find that, you know, most of us, obviously, we are fasting, we're not eating overnight. And whatever that window is that works for you, again, listen to your body. There's also been some research too showing women have very different responses to this because of our hormones, and we tend to have higher levels of cortisol. More women tend to find that they eat more or that it affects their energy more, and this is just because kind of like the way that our hormone system is regulated, we're a little bit more in tune to that stress response that's happening. So I don't recommend anyone like do this or to follow a hard and fast time, but again, some people might naturally like eat at, you know, 7 p.m. and then eat again the next day at 7 a.m. But I really recommend and encourage, like, listen to your body, find what works for you. If you're, you know, tired and hangry and you have low energy, then this probably isn't really working for you. So I hope that kind of helps. All right. Do you believe if you eat a good diet that you need any additional supplements? So, this is a great question. You know, I think it's hard. There's, you know, mixed stuff out there. So yes, I think if you're eating overall, you know, a lot of the vitamins and minerals are found in grains, in fruits and vegetables. And so if you're eating, you know, a lot of these kinds of things, we would think that we would be meeting our needs. But I do think that there definitely are times when supplements can be helpful. You know, there is kind of different theories out there as to how nutrient dense our food is now, just kind of given our current food supply. So I think like a standard multivitamin, you know, isn't the worst thing. And also as we age, you know, we do need sometimes changes in certain vitamins. If we're having issues with absorption, and certain, you know, medical issues have found that we do require certain supplementation. So I think it's all going to kind of vary. But what I will say is the supplement industry is not regulated to the same degree as our food supply. And that means that essentially there's a real lack of regulation. And so what the manufacturer puts on the label is not necessarily what's in that product. So using a third-party testing site like consumer labs is really important to find like which products, which brands tend to be more accurate and more reliable. And there's a lot of products out there, a lot of things that can interact with other medications, and that can, so it's important that if you are wanting to try certain supplements, talking to a doctor, registered dietitian, because there are some products out there that can actually be more harmful. But again, a standard multivitamin, is going to be fine, things like that. Hope that answered that question. Yeah. Any other questions? I'll definitely be touching on a lot of these kind of topics too in future presentations as well. Like I said, the nutrition myths one for sure talks a lot about fasting and supplements and things like that. So we can definitely go over that in even greater detail then. Let me see, there is. Okay, and then a question about organic. This one's a tough one to buy organic. So nutritionally, from most of the research that's out there, there is not a difference nutritionally. So an organic pineapple to a regular pineapple is nutritionally going to be about the equivalent. However, organic does limit what certain types of chemicals are used on that product. I think this is such a murky area because there isn't anything really compelling one way or the other. I think it's really like a personal choice. And I kind of recommend that, buying organic for certain products is going to be more beneficial. So, trying to get organic, when you think about produce, like I mentioned earlier, if it has like a peel, so an avocado or a banana, that protective outer layer, will protect it to some degree, right? Some degree from things like pesticides and again, I say to some degree. So for example, it might be more worthwhile to buy certain products organic, say like berries or lettuces, kale, things that are obviously like going to be taking in way more versus maybe buying more natural, more of the conventional like bananas or things like that. So again, it's a personal preference. It's really challenging, and obviously there's budgetary constraints. So I think, if you are buying organic, wherever you can buy more of the organic, grass-fed meats are typically going to have a healthier profile. Same with like things like your eggs and so your proteins, those produce, again, that's kind of a way to maybe like not have to buy everything organic if it doesn't work, but a way to still kind of minimize that exposure. So hopefully that helps. Yeah, love all the questions, everyone. This has been super great. Thanks for all the comments. Yeah, so I'm really looking forward to, doing a few more, obviously, over the next few months. So I hope everyone will come and join, and this has been really great. I've been really excited to work with you all. So thank you for having me. And as I mentioned too, here's my contact info and my email. So you can always reach out to me as well. And hopefully I'll see all of you again soon, for the next one.
Thank you very much, Erin.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye. We'll close up now. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.